Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and just recently, over the weekend, we got an update to the Sega 32X core. It came in conjunction with a new Sega Saturn core, but the Saturn core just kind of fixes a few visual glitches that aren't the most interesting things to talk about, but getting a new Sega 32X core that gets some more games playing and fixes some freezing is definitely more exciting. And even though the 32X is relegated to the also ran status console as far as Sega is concerned, it is still a fun library of games and definitely something worth checking out on MiSTer FPGA, and that's always a fun time. Before I get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. The last time we took a look at this core was probably a year ago, and Knuckles Chaotix was definitely working as far as the gameplay was concerned, but there was a freezing bug within the actual game in and of itself, and that actually happened in the attract mode. If you watch through this entire sequence and you let the gameplay demos play, at some point in time this would freeze the core and you would have to reset the MiSTer FPGA, or maybe just reset within the actual core menu. It's been so long now I can't remember, but when SRG 320 updates Sega Saturn and 32X at the same time, it usually means that there's probably something related between the two, because don't forget the same Hitachi SH processors within the Sega Saturn are in the 32X as well. Yes, they're running at different clock speeds and there might be some tiny differences, but the code base is generally going to be the same as far as the calls to the hardware and what they can actually do instruction set wise. So this must have been something that fixed two different cores at the same time. But in this gameplay demo sequence here, the attract mode, at some point in time it would freeze and never get back out. So that has definitely been fixed in this most current core, and I know Knuckles Chaotix is a game you can play from start to finish and complete on the current core. Or do you want to do that? That's up to you. It's definitely not the best 2D quote-unquote Sonic game ever, even if it is based on Knuckles, but it is a very pretty game, and all of the sprite scaling going on here on the 32X, all of the rotations, things like that really do show off what a really fun looking 32X game could be. It just, unfortunately, with the whole ring mechanic here being bound to your partner, is either something that you're totally going to enjoy or something that you're really not going to be into at all. But I just love how this game looks, and now on the current core, the fact that it's not going to freeze is going to be even better. This is just such a pretty game. Unfortunately, it's not really married to the best gameplay known to man, but tell me down below, did you play Knuckles Chaotix back in the day? Have you played it recently? What's your opinion on it? I know not everyone's going to think it's a hidden gem, but maybe more people have fun with it than I think. Now moving over to WWF Raw, here's another game that is now working, and apparently there was some sort of handoff issue between the 32X hardware and the Sega Genesis hardware that was preventing that. Because don't forget, the 32X is dependent on the base Sega Genesis and the hardware in that as well to create an entire image. If you go into software emulation and you turn off different layers on 32X or on Sega Genesis, you will notice some things are still on screen, and that's because the 32X hardware and the Sega Genesis hardware would combine their power together to create one image. Now, reality of the 32X is not every single game looks like it's doing much with it whatsoever. WWF Raw here, a ton of fun, but honestly, not the prettiest game in the world. You kind of wonder where the power of the 32X actually went when it came to making a game like this, other than the fact that it does have a secret character that the Genesis version doesn't have. And that was kind of the reality of the 32X. Some games did so much with it you could 100% tell it was basically a new console, and other games basically just phoned in ports to the hardware, and WWF Raw definitely feels maybe more on that phoned in side of things. But it is a game that used to have a lot of problems and basically not be playable whatsoever, that now you can just sit down and enjoy. And I mean, it's got Jerry the King Lawler in the background as well as good old JR, and I love that. Unfortunately, it doesn't have any music, so here's your sound effects sample. I mean, hey, it's a noise, and honestly, that's kind of the reality with some of these games. They don't really feel like they're doing much with the 32X, but I looked into the background in that pause, and basically there was a reset I/O state as far as the Sega Genesis hardware was concerned that kept it from basically working on the core, and that has now been fixed. But don't forget, for every game, something like Raw that really isn't that exciting, you have something like NBA Jam that's going to be awesome, or something like Metalhead here, it's going to be in full 3D with polygons and textures on them. The 32X definitely runs the gamut of games that feel like they're just Sega Genesis games on a 32X card to cash in, to something like this, which is clearly nothing that the Sega Genesis based hardware could ever imagine. But another game that seems to be working now is the beta of Pinocchio. This is an unreleased game, and last time it was tested, it didn't work on the core, and big thanks to Andy D for helping with some of the footage here as well. And in about a minute, I'm actually going to give you your soundtrack sample because this game has real music. But that's the interesting thing about the 32X. There are some betas out there because a lot more games are in development than actually released, but because this basically failed at market, it did not have a good install base. So many games that were going to come out were just basically canceled because you'd have to sell basically to every single person who bought one to even get a chance to recoup your profits there. But hey, at least Pinocchio, a game that never actually finished on the 32X, has music that I can sound sample for you versus WWF Raw, which just has sound effects. So go ahead and listen for 30 seconds and I'll come back and show you a few more of the improvements on the 32X core. I mean, it might not be the most exciting soundtrack you've ever heard, but it sounds good coming out of the MiSTer FPGA 32X core, and it was again a game that I don't believe actually even loaded last time we checked it out. Now moving over to a sample program, unfortunately I can't let you listen to the audio, but this is again something that never used to work. In the background is going to be music from Star Wars, and that is an instantaneous copyright flag as far as Lucas is concerned and Disney, so it's not anything I can let you listen to, but it never used to work, and that is always fun. But again, there's so many different fun games to play on 32X, and with the MiSTer FPGA core, you can play basically all of them now. Yes, there's still some glitches here and there. Yes, it's not a complete core, but it is one of those things. Super Tempo here, an awesome game. If you want to play it, you can play it from start to finish, and I've never been able to tell any issues with it whatsoever. And not that many people have 32X hardware. I've got one on my Sega CDX, and I play it now and again, but honestly, even though the core isn't done, MiSTer FPGA is definitely the direction I go when I want to play something like the 32X, and that's why cores like this are so awesome and so important, because I'm sure the large majority of you didn't have a 32X back in the day and probably still don't have one now. But leave me a comment down below and tell me, did you have one on your Genesis back in the 90s? I remember asking for one for Christmas, so my parents actually didn't get it for me, and they probably did me a favor because it would have been disappointing. Maybe they'd read some reviews and just realized it wasn't what I thought it was. But the hype for the 32X back in the day was real. The idea that you could play something like Virtual Fighter in your home that got to a close approximation of what the Model 1 arcade hardware could do was mind-blowing back then, and Sega did have a good idea with the 32X. It's just that the timing of the console was flawed. You had the Sega Saturn coming out so close after the 32X, people really wondered why they'd want to buy this versus Sega's traditional new console. So I'm sure the 32X could have done a lot more than we actually saw it do, and unfortunately that's just kind of how these things work. But something like WWF Raw here is now playable. Stuff like Knuckles Chaotix isn't going to freeze anymore. Pinocchio, that beta of an unreleased game, is going to work. And just around the edges of the 32X core, there's improvements basically everywhere, and that is awesome to see. And again, because they use Hitachi SH2 processors just like Saturn, just at a lower clock speed, I'm sure some of the fixes you're seeing here may in fact help the Sega Saturn core. But leave me a comment down below and tell me, is the 32X a good console or a bad console? I'm kind of really on the fence as to which direction I would go any single day. I was able to excited that we got a new core, so I'm going to say the 32X is a misunderstood console with some good games. But next time we get a new Saturn update or a 32X update, I will update the video as well. And right now this isn't an update also. If you want the new core, you got to grab it over on MiSTer Discord. Short of that, we are done. Go play some 32X, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.